Well, how brave you all are. I'm sure you've noticed what time it is. So I have one thing to say to you. Listen to your mother. Now, Westerners are really fond of a particular saying that very much sticks in my craw, and the saying is, life isn't fair. And after they have apprised you of the fact that life isn't fair, some of the more snide will announce triumphantly, so get used to it. Life isn't fair, get used to it. Well, here's something. If you say to an Iroquois clan mother, life isn't fair, you know what she's going to say? Then make it fair! In fact, I distinctly recall when I was a little kid. I was about 8 or 9 years old, and TV at that time consisted of replaying movies that had been out in the 40s and early 50s. And so if you turned on the TV in the afternoon and say, well, Mom was making dinner, there was going to be some old movie on the channel. And I remember in particular one old movie, it was a courtroom scene. A defendant in the courtroom was protesting against the law under which he was about to be sentenced, or at least convicted. And he jumped up and he yelled, but it's not fair, it's not fair. And the prosecutor, very unctuously and self-importantly, walked up, I think he had a big Bible, and he slapped it down in front of the defendant and said, show me in there where it says life is fair. And at that point, the jury started twittering, and this was supposed to be comic relief in this very grim movie. Well, it's not actually quite comic relief, and in fact, as the scene was progressing, I could hear my mother in the kitchen banging pots and pans around, and all of a sudden she shouted, she had a pan in each hand, and she shouted, then make it fair, you sadist! In my house, we did a lot of shouting at TV. You know, TV is a big purveyor of Western values. And it was like a running fight with the television. I'm surprised nobody put their foot through the dang thing. Now, this is a piece of advice worth listening to, isn't it? Then make it fair. Make it fair. This is a piece of mother right advice. This is the sort of thing that a mother is going to tell you. The contrast between Western patriarchal and Iroquois matriarchal culture couldn't be more obvious than in this particular little exchange. There's a lot of things trailing around the edges of this example, but mainly, I think that it displays the perceptions of Western culture about how much power little people have. You know, we're all the little people. Under patriarchy, the answer is none. Under matriarchy, there are no little people, there are just people, and the answer to how much power people have is total. We have total power. Now, I've spent a long time, a lot of my life, trying to think about where this distinction comes from between the patriarchal and the matriarchal approaches to things. And I believe that it comes from Western culture's God ideation. The Iroquoian make it right comes from the matriarchal God ideation, and there's no actual God ideation involved. It just comes from Iroquoian spirituality. Now, I know that academics are not supposed to talk about spirituality, and I can get drummed out of the academic corps for even mentioning the word. In fact, I'm supposed to run from it screaming like it's carrying hemorrhagic smallpox or something. But I think if we're going to examine the real impetus of mother right, we're not going to get anywhere until we walk right up and we look at the spiritual underpinnings of the system. By the same token, I don't think we're going to be really able to free ourselves of the really damaging effects of patriarchy until and unless we recognize the spiritual allegiances that undermine community, constantly undermine community in patriarchy. Now, the Iroquois are totally unapologetic about having spirituality as a part of just about everything we do, and I think that Aggie certainly brought that home. So if we want to understand anything that's economic, that's social, that's political, we need to look at the spiritual underpinnings of it. And this is another thing that I heard from my female elders. If you want to understand a thing, look at its spiritual structure, look at its spiritual roots. And if you see those roots, then you will understand what that thing is. Now, every council of any honor begins just as this one did, with somebody delivering the Thanksgiving address, the words before all else. And I think it's important, if you understand it on a mature level, what you understand is that there's an energy out, Thanksgiving, the energy out, to allow the energy that comes back in to replace the energy that just went out. That's what you're actually doing, recycling energy here. And you cannot acquire the one good mind of consensus unless you are doing the energy out to allow the energy in. And that was the container that you were talking about, Jen, I think. And in fact, if a council fails, you know what? Traditional people are going to look around at the faith keeper that opened it there with that Thanksgiving and wonder if maybe there was something wrong with the original presentation. There wasn't. It was beautiful, Aggie. But people will wonder what was going on with the faith keeper, that he or she did not present this correctly to allow the consensus to begin to build. Now, Aggie certainly explained it, but in the Thanksgiving, basically what you're doing is you're starting from Mother Earth and then you're working your way up to the stars. So you're going from the earth on up. And you're actually standing there and you're recognizing every single entity, every single one. And one by one, you're recognizing the special wisdom, the special gift that each one brings in and thanking them for it. That's actually what you're doing in that address. And one of the things that tells us is that the one good mind of consensus actually requires the active participation of everybody in the community. It can't be done without active participation by all. So everybody matters. Everybody counts. And I remember my mother specifically saying, don't leave anyone out. Don't leave anyone out. And if anything was ever counted up and somebody was left out, you started counting again from the very beginning. Why? Because somebody was left out. And that's not acceptable, because exclusivism destroys community. It's the first and best way to destroy community. Inclusivism, on the other hand, is very important to creating community. It hears absolutely every comment. It hears everything that's going on, and it hears it in the voices that raise the issue. That's pretty important. I think one of the most damaging misunderstandings of good-mindedness is something that actually Heidi was just talking about, is the assumption that because everyone is equal, everyone possesses equal amounts of wisdom and talent. And therefore, everybody should share equal amounts of power. Okay, well, this is a prescription for disaster if I ever heard one. Because people simply do not have the same type or amount of talent or wisdom. Everybody has a different thing. That's why, in the words before all else, we acknowledge the special thing that each one is bringing. If everybody was bringing the same thing, there'd be no need for those words. It's basically patriarchal monotheism that thinks that everybody looks alike. You know, seen one, seen them all. That's a patriarchal idea. Instead, everybody has a limited amount of wisdom and a limited amount of talent, and the idea is to make it all work together for the good of everybody. No one person's going to be able to do this alone. Each spirit has a limited amount of knowledge, and that goes for human beings, that goes for any of the spirits. For example, if you want to know about corn, what do? Well, you go ask Sister Corn. That's what you do. She sure knows a lot about being corn. She knows more than you and I do. She knows more about being corn than Sister Squatch does. But guess what? If you ask her about Brother Tobacco, she might know a little bit about him, but she doesn't really know about Brother Tobacco. If you want to know about him, you better go ask him. Okay? And one of the important points spiritually about this is that there is nothing that's all-knowing. There's no all-knowing spirit anywhere. Everything is a collective attempt. We all dump it into the center and then see what we got after we're done collecting up all of what we have. I think that it's important to understand that the sort of spirituality that patriarchy works from comes from a desert locale. Okay? It's a desert spirit. It's a desert god. And it's a male desert god. And he may know some things, but everything he knows comes from a desert, right? And if you transplant that spirit out of his proper place, which is a desert place, and dump him, say, on the Great Lakes, he's going to have absolutely no idea of what's going on in the Great Lakes, because there are spirits of place, and those spirits of place know what belongs in that place. You cannot transplant spirits from one place to another. They do not understand, nor will they recognize, or be able to know what to do with ceremonies that were created in another place. It's quite improper to perform ceremonies from one place in another place where the spirits here don't understand what's going on.